أهلا وسهلا فيكم متابعينا. خليكم معنا لنتعرف على إحدى أكثر العائلات الفنية الغنائية والسينمائية اليهودية المصرية عراقة، وهي عائلة مراد الشهيرة اللي كان من ضمنها النجمة السينمائية ليلى مراد وشقيقها الملحن الموسيقي والممثل منير مراد. وقامت ليلى مراد ببطولة الكثير من الأفلام السينمائية الأكثر نجاحا مثل يحيى الحب، حبيب الروح، قلبي دليلي، شاطئ الغرام. وكان يقوم شقيقها منير مراد الممثل ومساعد المخرج والذي اكتسب شهرته الكبيرة بتلحينه مجموعة من أكثر الأغنيات نجاحا وتميزا في تاريخ السينما المصرية والعربية، مثل إن رح منك يا عين، تعال أقول لك، حاجة غريبة، سوق على مهلك، بحلم بيك، وأول مرة تحبي يا قلبي، ودق الشماسي. ولكن هذا التاريخ الجميل من النجومية والتعايش كان له جانب مظلم، حيث يقول أقرباء لعائلة مراد بأن العائلة عانت من بعض التمييز والضغوطات لأنهم من يهود مصر. وفي عام 1967 تم القبض على ابن منير مراد زكي مراد الذي كان معروف أيضا باسم جاك في منزل عمته ليلى مراد، وتم سجنه ومن ثم طرده مع أغلب من تبقى من يهود مصر في هذا الوقت، حيث انتقل إلى الولايات المتحدة. اليوم رح نعمل أول لقاء إعلامي مع حفيد منير مراد، وهو موريس أسولين الأمريكي الفخور جدا، لكن لساته بيحتفظ بتقديره القوي لتراثه وتراث عائلته ولتراث مصر، وهو أيضا يهوى العزف على العود. أهلا وسهلا فيك معنا موريس أسولين.
حد الشاب ليلى مراد، حد الشاب ليلى مراد، حد الشاب، حد الشاب.
Thank you so much for joining us today, Mouris Assolin.
Thank you. Thank you.
You speak a little bit of Arabic, so do you want to start with saying something in Arabic or should we just stick to English?
I'll say أنا سعيد جدا أكون معك يا هنا على يلا. أنا آسف أني مش ممكن أتكلم في العربي لكل المقابلة، بس هو أسهل لي في الإنجليزي.
طيب خلاص في الإنجليزي. You come from such a dynasty in arts, in movies, and music. Your grandfather Munir Murad and Layla Murad, both Jewish Egyptian, at one point converted to Islam.
Yes.
Your father, on the other hand, grew up Jewish and stayed with his own faith. Can you tell us about that aspect of your family?
There was a couple of the family members that converted. Lila, Munir, and my aunt Samiha, I believe, also. I think they did it because in Egypt it was easier to be Muslim. You had more rights. You could get more done. You were more part of the society. Even though I think that the Jews, for much of their own part, were part of the society as much as they could be. My father, though, he stayed very traditional. He didn't really practice a whole lot in terms of the Judaism that he knew.
Tell us about that. And what happened with your father that he had to leave Egypt? Because we will talk about the religious aspect. I think that's very important. But there was a pressure that was rising on the Jewish community. And your own father was a victim of that.
Yes. So I would say that there was always like a little underlying pressure, always. Because when you're Jewish in a Muslim country, you're not the majority and you're certainly not the state religion. So other than that, though, I think they did fairly okay. I mean, there's a lot of positive history that came out. Unfortunately, in around 1948, when Israel declared its statehood, things kind of got a little bit troublesome in some of the Arab countries. Egypt stayed, I think, fairly okay because, and I only know this because I know that most of the Jews, some of the Jews who left in like 52, so at least for 4 years or so, they kind of were okay. And then there was another, I won't call it so much as an exodus, it was more of a being thrown out. I guess you could call it an exile. Because my father didn't leave on his own volition. He was actually arrested and thrown in jail and then thrown out. And he was arrested actually at my Aunt Lila's house. I believe he was playing with my cousin Zaki, who is Zaki Fatin Abdel Wahab, the famous actor who unfortunately Allah yarhamhu, passed away, I want to say a year ago or so.
Yeah.
So things were, you know, it always had a little underlying tone, but it got worse. And in 1967 is, I think, when it really hit its highest peak. And I know there were other things going on. There were some political revolutions. I think there was a Falaheen movement of some sort. And all foreigners were sort of deemed unwelcome at that point. And, you know, for me...
In the Jewish community that has been ancient.
Correct.
Who was deemed a foreigner.
Correct. And we had been in Egypt longer than almost anyone who was part of the government, for one part, you know, because Egypt was ruled by Mamluks at one point, and then King Farouk, I think, was of Albanian descent. So, I mean, he wasn't the one in power at the time anyway, but, you know, we had been there. We have ancient communities throughout all of North Africa and the Middle East. My last name is a testament to that, because Asولين is the original last name. I know some people say Morduchai.
Yeah.
That is a Hebraization. That's the Hebrew name for Murad. So Murad was the name, but it was the name of my great-great-grandfather, who was named Murad Asولين, who came from Morocco.
Oh.
And when my great-grandfather started to sing more in a public setting, as opposed to being a cantor, like I would call it a hazan in Hebrew, which is the person who leads the services in the knis.
Yes. So during the prayers and the Shabbat services.
Correct. And all the holidays.
The hazan is the leader in the prayer and who sings the prayers.
Yes.
Okay.
And when he started to sing, though, more for public venues and in the operettas and all the things that he did like that, he changed it. So his name was Zaki ibn Murad Asولين. And Asولين is a Berber name. From what I understand, it's Berber Jews were the Jews that came across North Africa with the Phoenicians. So this is going back quite a long time.
Yes.
And he changed it to Zaki Murad. He just cut out Ibn and Asولين. And that was kind of how the stage name got created. So...
and the Mordechai is basically the Hebrew Murad.
Correct.
Yes.
So yeah, we would say Mordechai in Hebrew, but Murad is how we would use the equivalent name.
Okay.
So, so yeah, that's basically our history there, which is very ancient.
Yes.
And ended very abruptly.
So your father, when the Egyptian authorities went and arrested your father,
yes,
what was the reason that they stated?
He's Jewish. I mean, that's all I've ever heard.
Wow.
So he was basically just arrested for being Jewish. And the rest of the Jews who were in the country were arrested as well. My father kind of got off on one part, which is that when you were born in Egypt, you didn't just get citizenship right away. Perhaps if you were a Muslim, you might have gotten it, I'm not sure. But if you were Jewish, you had to apply for citizenship.
Oh.
So he was an Italian citizen. The benefit to him about that is that they treated the Egyptian citizens much worse. I know some people who had Egyptian citizenship, and when they were in jail, they were actually subject to beatings and other physical abuse that my father did not have to endure. My grandfather did try to get him like a little bit of good treatment in there, but my father refused it because he said if the other people aren't, you know, if my other Jewish brothers aren't going to get it, I'm not going to get it either. So he was in jail for...
What year was that?
1967.
Just so our audience know about your grandfather, because Leyla Murad is very known and she started in so many great movies, and she's known to having all of her movies being a great success. Your grandfather wrote some of the most classical, popular Egyptian classical songs until today. So, I mean, and we're gonna play some of them to our audience so they know.
إن راح منك يا عين حيروح من قلبي فين إن راح منك يا عين حيروح من قلبي فين ده القلب يحب مرة ما يحبش مرتين
عيش أيامك عيش على طول خلي شبابك عمره يطول افرح ارقص غني قد ما تقدر عيش تعالي أقولك
هتقول إيه
لازم أقولك
وساكت ليه
هسأل سؤال وتردي عليه
So like amazing songs, let me tell you, I memorize all of them. Of course, all of the different generations, younger generations, everybody knows these songs.
Wow.
These are until now big hits, and there's the nostalgia and going back to that like golden age, right? And that's your grandfather who wrote them.
Yeah.
Being a part of this family, what can you share with us? I know that you were a toddler basically when your grandfather passed away, Munir Murad. Tell us a little bit more.
I would say that most of my memories are probably from pictures and video. I don't know if I could actually say I have memories of my own. I was probably too young to have them. But the video, my father was very ahead of his time. He videoed everything, and this is in, the late 70s, early 80s.
Wow.
So thank God he took these videos, hours of them, and we have a lot of my grandfather when he came and he played on the oud, and it was very, very nice to see that, because that's kind of how I remember him.
So your grandfather, Munir Murad, visited your father in your family?
Yes.
Was it here in the United States?
Yes, he came a couple of times. Unfortunately, he died shortly after he visited the last time. So he went back to Cairo, and I think only about a month or two later, and he passed away.
Tell us about your own father's recollection of his father, Munir, and his aunt, Leyla, and his life in Egypt.
So I think my father lived kind of like the son of a Hollywood elite life, He was friends with all the very high class individuals, government officials, actors, actresses, all like that kind of thing. From what he's told me, he had a good relationship with his father, although one story he related to me was that he went to pick up the oud once, and my grandfather, alayhi rahmu, he grabbed it away from him and he said, "I don't want you to have the same life as me." Because my grandfather was always out, he was always playing at concerts, always playing for people in private venues. And so he was kind of a night owl, he never really was around when my dad was awake, and then when my dad was awake, he was sleeping. So he just wanted to kind of prevent him, I guess, from having the same life. Maybe that was a good thing, maybe it was a bad thing. My father, I think, did have some talent, and he could have perhaps been something in the same, in the same vein, but that's what I remember him telling me.
You and your brother are basically the only biological descendants of Munir Murad.
Yes.
How do you guys feel about the betrayal of the Murad family and dynasty and different books that were published and a TV series that was produced in Egypt? Tell me about that.
I mean, so far what I've seen, I think it's been somewhat fair. I don't think that they've been portrayed in a negative way at all. The series that it's a long series, I haven't been able to watch it all. They kind of made it that my aunt and my grandfather, were like into the Islam, and that's why they converted. I don't know the answer to that question. I don't know if they were interested or if they did. There was one book I read that mentioned something about the rights of a woman married to a Muslim man. And as a Muslim woman, she had many, many more rights than she did as a Jew. And so apparently I had read in this book that when she married Anwar Wagdi the first time around, she had kind of a rough time. And then the second time she sort of got wiser to this. She converted and she married him again. And that time she ended up with, I don't know what rights they are. I did not investigate them exactly. Mm-hmm. So I don't know if it's just more say in the house or if it's actually more legal rights. I think it's the latter.
It's more legal rights, yes.
So, I mean, on that front, I could understand if she was going to do that and marry Anwar Wagdi, why she would have, kind of gone all the way so that she could be protected. Obviously, they probably did some things that were religious from the Muslim perspective. But again, I don't think that it's really a haram for the Jew to partake in some of that because it's the same God in a sense, right? Mm-hmm. We said Allah, inshallah, Allah, we said all these same phrases.
And it's the idea of also one God.
Exactly.
Worshipping one God.